Hey there, today we're going to tackle a really fundamental Python skill, how to loop through tuples. Once you get this down, trust me, your code is going to be so much cleaner and way more efficient. So let's dive right in. Okay, so let's start with a question to get our brains warmed up. Imagine you've got a list of items, but there's a catch. You're not allowed to change it, at all. How in the world do you work with something like that? Well, Python has a special tool for this exact problem, and it has its own set of rules for looping. And that tool is the tuple. Now, the single most important thing to remember about a tuple is that it's immutable. It's a bit of a fancy word, but all it really means is that once you create it, everything inside is locked in place. You can't add things, you can't remove things, it's set in stone. And that's exactly why we need to know the right ways to loop through and get what we need from it. But here's the good news. It is not nearly as complicated as it might sound. In fact, in just the next few minutes, we're going to walk through the 3 essential ways to loop through tuples. By the end of this, you'll know exactly which tool to grab for which job. Okay, let's kick things off with method number 1, the simple and direct for loop. This is, hands down, the most common, most straightforward, and I'd say the most Pythonic way to get this done. It's the one you'll see most often. So let's look at the code. Super simple. First, we've got our tuple with apple, banana, and cherry. Then the magic happens in that for loop. See how it reads? For x in this tuple. It's almost like plain English. It's just saying for every item in my tuple, let's call it x for a moment and then print it. That's it. So when do you use this one? Well, you should reach for a direct for loop anytime you just need the values themselves. You just want the apple, the banana, the cherry, and you couldn't care less about whether they're in the first, second, or third position. It keeps your code super clean, readable, and it really follows that core Python idea of keeping things simple. But what if you do care about the position? What if you need to know not just the value, but also its exact spot in the tuple? Well, that's where our second method comes into play, looping with an index. Now, this might look a little more intimidating at first glance, but let's break it down. It's actually super logical. First, Python looks at len of this tuple. That just gets the length of our tuple, which is 3. Then, range 3 creates a sequence of numbers for us, 0, 1, and 2. So now, our for loop is actually looping through those numbers, not the fruit. And we use those numbers to grab the item at each position. This tuple 0, then this tuple 1, and so on.
This method is your go-to for some very specific situations. You'll want to use it when you absolutely need both the item's value and its position number. Maybe you need to say something like, item banana was found at position 1. This gives you that extra bit of control that the simple for loop just doesn't have.
All right, on to our third and final method, the while loop. The best way to think about this one is as the manual transmission of looping. It gives you the absolute most control, but it also means you're in charge of all the little details yourself. And you can see those manual steps right here in the code. First, you have to set up your own counter variable, I equals 0. Second, you set the condition, keep this loop going as long as I is less than the length of the tuple. And third, and this is so important, you have to remember to increase the counter yourself inside the loop with I equals I plus 1. If you forget that last little line, you'll get stuck in an infinite loop forever. So that's the trade-off, right? The while loop offers you maximum fine-grained control, which is awesome for some really complex logic. But it's also more verbose. It just takes more lines of code to write. And like we just said, all the responsibility of managing that index is on you. Phew, okay, we've covered all 3 methods. Now for what might be the most important part. How do you choose the right tool for the right job? Let's put it all together in a super simple guide. And here it is, your tuple looping cheat sheet. It really just boils down to this. If you just need the items themselves, use the direct for loop. It's clean and simple. If you need both the item and its position, switch to the for loop with an index. And for those rare, really complex situations where you need to be in total control, the while loop is what you want. All right, time for a quick pop quiz, just to make sure all this is sinking in. Based on everything we've talked about, what's the correct, most standard way to just loop through the items in a tuple? And there you have it. The simple, clean, direct for loop. Honestly, this is the one you're going to use probably 90% of the time. It's just the most efficient way to get the job done for most everyday programming tasks. Okay, we covered a lot there in a pretty short amount of time. So let's do a quick-fire recap of the most important points to really lock this stuff in. Here are the 3 main things to remember. 1, Your default choice, your go-to method should always be the direct for loop. It's simple and clean. 2, only bring in the index-based loop when you actually need that position information. And 3, keep the powerful while loop in your back pocket for those really complex scenarios where you need total manual control.
And that's it. You now have a solid guide to looping through tuples in Python. You don't just know how to do it, you know when to use each specific method. So the real question is, what will you build next? Thanks for watching.